Hey, what's going on, everybody? Justin here at Trumful Reads, and in this video we're going to be doing my January TBR, and I've picked out about 10 books that I'd like to get through in the month of January or so. Usually I stick pretty good to the TBRs. The past like 2 months that I've been missing, not so much maybe, but I got a pretty good selection here. Got some science, got some good ancient classical history, and also got some fantasy. I've pretty much been slacking off on fantasy, like the end of the year of 2018, but I'd like to get going on that again. And kind of, I think one of my goals, I haven't done the goals video yet, but I think finishing up a lot of the series. I know I posted a video where I had like 20 or something series that I hadn't completed, but I started, and I think I only finished like 2 or 3 over the course of the whole year. So, but anyways, that's for another video. Let's just get started with this one. And for the 2 NetGalley books, I still got like 5 or 6 behind or something on NetGalley. The first one is going to be Overrun. I don't know if you can really see it on my Kindle. If you can, I'll put it up right there. But anyways, it's Overrun by Andrew Reeves, and the subtitle is Dispatches from the Asian Carp Crisis. And basically, from what I understand, in the Midwest, maybe not so much where I live in Maine, but pretty much carp were introduced in like the 70s and 80s on a large scale to sort of like eat weeds and stuff around like the riverbanks and everything, but they pretty much took over and proliferated, and apparently there's like really funny YouTube videos of people getting hit, like I guess from these carp that are just like flying through the air because they jump out of the water and stuff, but they pretty much become a nuisance in a lot of areas. So I guess this book is about how we're supposed to handle that, or what's actually being done to handle that, something like that. So it sounded kind of interesting, so when I saw it on NetGalley, I requested it. So there's that one, and this one I'm going to put out, it's The Flavor of Wood by Arthur Caesar Erlach, and I have the subtitle, In Search of the Wild Taste of Trees, from Smoke and Sap to Root and Bark. I have absolutely no idea what I'm getting into with this book. Apparently it's about like eating or tasting flavors from trees, I guess in cuisines around the world or something. I'm not quite sure exactly, like with like the bark and stuff. So apparently maybe in other places, ingredients from like directly from trees is more prominent than in the America or something. So I think that might be kind of interesting. So when I saw that one, I had to just like find out more about that as well, and that's why I requested that one. Alright, so now let's go on to the fantasy. Alright, I read the first book of The Grimm Company, which was The Grimm Company, I guess, by Luke Skoll, and this is the second one is The Sword of the North. I think I read that in January of last year when I was first starting to get into fantasy and stuff. But yeah, if I remember correctly, it wasn't like my favorite. It was kind of like very middle of the road. But I already had The Sword of the North, so I figured, I might as well give it another chance to see if I've grown as like a reader, or if my tastes have changed at all and stuff. If I remember correctly, I do think I'd like this one more because The Sword of the North is a character I enjoyed more than the main character of the first one. So I'm definitely going to be excited. And I'm always just like totally trash for anything like snow or ice related on fantasy covers. I've literally bought 1, 2, and I think there's another one. Basically just because there was like snow and ice on the cover or theme or something like that. So yeah, that's why I picked up that one. And for another one, I guess it's not really fantasy, I guess, but Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology. I meant to read this in December, didn't really get to it, like a lot of the books on my December TBR, but I still might listen to the audiobook on this one because everyone said it's phenomenal. Basically, Neil Gaiman's narration of Norse mythology is supposed to be just excellent. So I haven't decided yet if I'm going to read it or listen to it, but Anansi Boys is the only other Neil Gaiman I've read, and I've heard that's kind of like one of like the weakest ones he had. And even though it wasn't my favorite, it was still a really great story. So I think his storytelling skills will just be like greatly on display with Norse mythology, which is why I picked it up in the first place. All right, let's see. Those are the 2 fantasy ones. Now I was sent this book in December, and it's Brother John by August Turek. And at first, I wasn't quite sure if I was going to accept it or not. And the subtitle is A Monk, a Pilgrim, and the Purpose of Life. And at first I was kind of like, yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm not Catholic or anything like that, so I wasn't quite sure if it would, mean anything to me, I guess. But I was sold on that it was a really good Christmas story, and obviously you can tell it's short, but it has lots of really good paintings by Glenn Harrington, who apparently is like a really famous painter. But anyways, it's a short little read. I don't know why I didn't get to it in Christmas. Now I feel like terrible. So now I'm trying to read it. Well, I will read it like in the next upcoming days and see what it's all about. But anyways, from what I heard, it's just a really good, heartwarming story for the holiday season, which is why I then accepted it and agreed to do an unbiased review of it. Okay, so let's go on to a science book that I want to read, and it's Stiff, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers by Mary Roach. I think this was Mary Roach's first book, and I've heard really great things about it. I've read Packing for Mars by the same author, and it was fantastic. It's nonfiction, like humorous nonfiction done really well, and she puts in really quirky, humorous footnotes on purpose just to enlighten the reader more on some really comedic things that go on behind the scenes of a lot of these sorts of things that you're reading about. But I really enjoyed Packing for Mars, and she's got like 4, 5, 6 other books. So I figure I might as well just start reading her entire bibliography, so I think that'd be pretty cool. And so that's what I'm going with, Stiff. And now for a book that I'm taking as a recommendation from another booktuber, and it's Kathleen Jones from the channel Worth 1,000 Words. I'll leave her video link down below, but she gave A River in Darkness, One Man's Escape from North Korea by Masaji Ishikawa, a really, really good review. This book was on my radar already, but she totally sold me with her review of this book. And so I decided to check it out from the library, just because it's a short, it's a pretty short book, but she said it was just phenomenal, and like I said, I was already kind of interested in it anyways. It just sounds like a tragic but awesome story at the same time, and I'm really looking forward to reading A River in Darkness. Alright, for another history book, one I meant to read last month again in December for the holiday season is Silent Night, the story of the World War I Christmas truce. This is by Stanley Weintraub, and the Christmas truce of 1914 is one of my favorite sort of events of World War I. If you follow the channel at all, you may have picked up on that I read a lot of World War I history, which is pretty much the only major modern-ish topic that I read about, because once we get past like the Middle Ages, I kind of trail off on my like history reading, except for World War I. And like I said, I meant to read this during the holiday season of December 2018. Didn't quite get to it, but definitely want to pick up or read Silent Night this upcoming month in January. So yeah. Alright, now for an ancient Greek history, we have The Extraordinary Voyage of Pythias the Greek. I've already read about half of this now, didn't quite finish it. This is by Barry Cunliffe, who is primarily known as a Celtic scholar, I believe. But it's just a really interesting sort of exposition of what possibly could have happened on Pythias' journey. If you guys don't know, Pythias was a Greek from like the 4th century BCE from Marseille. Or Massalia, well, it was called Massalia back then, but Marseille, France, basically. And he basically went to the Arctic Circle, like to Britain, and then to like probably Norway, stuff like that, which was the first time any Greek had gone that far north. And it's all about his basically voyage and what he might have done and seen, all that sort of stuff. Pythias' work has not directly come down to us, though he was quoted fairly often by a couple of other classical writers such as Diodorus of Siculus and Strabo. But anyways, so he goes through the archaeological record and the written text record and stuff and kind of sifts through it and tries to find out exactly what may have happened with Pythias. So I find it's kind of like almost like a adventure exploration story, but like in the classical periods. It's kind of weird, but it's actually pretty fun so far. And lastly, for a Roman history book to complement my Greek history one, I'm trying to also read more direct histories again. Kind of slacked off on like my regular history reading, I guess, like towards the end of the year as well. But we got Rome's Last Citizen, The Life and Legacy of Cato, Mortal Enemy of Caesar. This is by two authors, Rob Goodman and Jimmy Soni, which is kind of different for a history book. And during last year, I read quite a few books about the age of like the last generation of the Roman Republic. I read a book about the assassination of Julius Caesar. I read a book about Cicero. I read a book about Mithridates, which is kind of like a little bit before, but all kind of in that same era. Which I thought was kind of weird how I was reading a bunch of books on like the end of the Roman Republic. And this one basically just also ties in to basically that era as well, as he really was like the mortal enemy of Caesar, pretty much to the end, and committed suicide rather than basically joining Caesar's Republic. But anyway, so like I said, I don't know anything about these two authors, but I think it'd be cool to read just a strict biography of Cato. He's not really my favorite Roman character, to be honest, nor Cato the Elder. But anyways, it's always good to read about people you don't always agree with sometimes. So try and expand my horizons with Rome's last citizen. Alright, so there you guys have it. Those are the 10-ish books I'm going to try and read in the month of January. If you know any of the authors, or if you've read these books, anything like that, leave some comments down below and tell me what you think. And also leave a comment about what book you're most excited for reading in the month of January coming up. And always remember, whatever you do end up reading, always remember, read victoriously.